Thank you, everybody, and good afternoon. My name is James Gore, Chair of the Sonoma County Board of Supervisors and President of the Sonoma Water Board of Directors. Thank you for joining us for Sonoma County's drought update for Thursday, August 4th. We're going to begin with a brief message for our Spanish-speaking viewers from Gilbert Martinez with our communications teams. Gilbert.
Buenas tardes y bienvenidos a la sesión informativa. Esta sesión informativa se está transmitiendo en vivo por nuestro canal de YouTube con interpretación al español. Para escuchar la versión en español, puede usar el link de YouTube que se encuentra en la página del Facebook del Condado de Sonoma. Gracias. Y ahora regresamos para atrás con James Gore.
Muchas gracias, Gilbert, por estar con nosotros hoy día en la tarde y siempre con nosotros y nuestra comunidad. Thank you very much. This is the fourth in a series of monthly town halls that the County of Sonoma and Sonoma Water are staging this summer and fall to give you the latest information on the drought and how it is impacting our county. We're joined by a panel of experts today: Chris Godley, Director of the County Department of Emergency Management; Philip Dutton, Senior Engineer with the State Water Resources Control Board. We also have Veronica Civi, Deputy Director of Water and Environmental Management with the Town of Windsor. And of course, always with us, our county's Communications Manager, Paul Gullickson. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. We're here to give you an update on the drought in Sonoma County. I'm going to start with the top line first, which is we're in a significant drought. Conserve water. Every drop counts. We're going to give a lot of information today on the actions that we are taking as system managers, but at the same time, each and every day, just like fire preparedness, just like management of you and your family, everything that you do each and every day makes a difference. And this being either the second drought in a decade or a decade-long drought with two bookends that we're experiencing right now, shows us that conservation has to be a way of life for us in Sonoma County and indeed throughout California. Today, we're going to learn more about the county's response to threats posed by this drought and other extreme weather events that are occurring more frequently as a result of climate change. We will also delve into impacts on our cities, our water districts, and farmers, landowners who are being required to reduce the amount of water that they can pull out of the Russian River and our creeks. We'll also tell you about an innovative program from the Town of Windsor that is distributing free recycled water, which individuals and businesses alike can use to keep their landscape thriving and irrigated throughout the drought. At the end, we're going to have some time to go through and answer as many questions as we can. There are three ways you can pose questions to our panelists or to me. If you have joined us on Zoom, please type your questions in the Q&A box. If you're watching this on Facebook or YouTube, you can type your questions in the comment areas below. You can also email us to our public affairs team at publicaffairs@sonoma-county.org. And we have staff monitoring that inbox who will pass along those questions to us. So let's get started. Sonoma County is now in the third year of what's classified as a severe drought. Rainfall has been well below the average for these last 2 years. And the first 6 months of this year have been the driest in the past 128 years, with our rainfall 20 inches below normal. Our water storage in Lake Sonoma is at 50%. Water storage in Lake Mendocino is at 44%, and we got work to do. We also got some unfortunate news this last week. The Federal Regulatory Energy Commission approved a request by PG&E to dramatically reduce diversions from the Eel River into the East Fork of the Russian River northeast of Ukiah. PG&E wants to preserve the water stored in Lake Pillsbury, which it owns and operates. The lake is the primary source of water in this section of the Eel River during the summer, but it's also a key source of water for people and businesses in Sonoma and Mendocino counties, as well as federally protected Chinook salmon and steelhead trout that spawn in the river and tributaries. Especially fragile in this system are the areas north of the Dry Creek intersection with the Russian River, which include Hillsburg, Geyserville, Cloverdale, Alexander Valley, and the like. Diversions from the Eel River flow into Lake Mendocino. The storage reservoir, that's not a big reservoir. It's about a third of the size of Lake Sonoma. It's a flashy reservoir, but it's also a primary source of water for residents, landowners, farmers, and others in between Cloverdale and Ukiah. Because of this, there's going to be significantly less water coming from up north, from Lake Pillsbury through the Potter Valley project, and that diversion into the east fork of the lake and down into Lake Mendocino for this summer. So as a result, there's going to be less to pump out of the Russian River, and we're all going to be impacted. On Monday, the State Water Resources Control Board implemented new curtailments on water rights holders along the Russian River. Further reductions could be coming later this month. We also have something that Philip will talk about from the state board, which is a voluntary conservation program in agreement with landowners up in that area that's already yielding savings and dividends, but we got more work to do. These diversions and curtailments, or excuse me, not diversions, but these curtailments will affect our cities, our water districts, our landowners, anyone else who's dependent upon the Russian River, which is mostly 600,000 people, not just those in that fragile area, but everybody who gets water from the Sonoma water system, which includes 600,000 people in Sonoma and Marin counties. Later today, we'll hear from a representative, as I mentioned before, Philip from the Water Resources Control Board, about the impacts and the decision of these federal regulators. As I said before, the bottom line up front, and again, is we need to continue to conserve water. There's no guarantee that we will get enough water this winter to replenish our reservoirs. So we're not just saving for this water year, but we're doing it for the next. A reminder to everybody out there that a full 50% plus of the water consumed in Sonoma County during the summer months is for outdoor irrigation. And that's not potable use, that's not farming, that's not business, that is for outdoor irrigation. So we need to be in the best situation possible to be able to do what's needed on our own yards, on our own landscapes, to be able to prepare not just for the coming months, but the coming years. Water saved now is water we can use later. And saving water now will reduce the chance that we will have to take even more drastic measures next year if we have another dry winter. Many of you have seen voluntary requests for drought savings and conservation goals. In other places, like in Hillsburg last year, there was a mandatory 50% cut that was invoked by the water company in Hillsburg on the residents. Similar actions taking place in other areas. Just as a high level, those of us with the County of Sonoma and Sonoma Water specifically, we manage as a wholesaler, right? We manage the water system and the water delivery out of the reservoirs from Lake Mendocino and also Lake Sonoma, but those go into retail areas. So we're going to hear a little bit later from our representative from the town of Windsor. For all of you, the 70% of you that live in cities in Sonoma County, and then the rest of you that depend upon water systems, not wells per se, but water systems, which is 80% plus of the population in Sonoma County, for you to work directly with the resources and for the voluntary and mandatory requirements, you will have to be in touch with your retail provider, whether that's a city water project, or if you are in a rural area and 25 of you are part of a small water system, you will have to be measuring your water together and going after the retail side of it. We manage the bulk wholesale. We work with those retailers to implement conservation targets. Thankfully, there's lots of work we can do together. There's lots of programs out there. There's retrofit programs for high water use appliances that help you switch those out. There's a list of all kinds of resources that can be found at savingwaterpartnership.org. Once again, savingwaterpartnership.org. Now it's time to turn to one of our experts on this. We'll start with Chris Godley, Director of the County Department of Emergency Management, for an overview of our drought emergency and its response. Chris, let us have it.
Sure. Good afternoon, everybody.
Good news, always.
As the supervisor indicated, I work with the Department of Emergency Management, and we're concerned mostly with disasters. In recent years, it's mostly been wildfire, a little bit of flood, but make no mistake about it, this drought is a very slowly unfolding, but very significant disaster for our county. Let me just share a few things with you very quickly. The first is, as we go through today's discussion, to keep in mind that we're in drought because even though we've had a relatively mild summer early part, we actually even caught that little bit of thunderstorms here earlier in the week. These dry conditions are persisting in our county, our state, and across the western United States. They are significant. So we're not out of this by any means just because we saw cooler temperatures or a tiny bit of rain. I'm also going to suggest this is especially concerning because we are looking at another potentially dry winter. And this is due to something called the La Nina effect. That is, the surface temperature of the ocean out there in the Pacific oscillates between being cooler, as a La Nina is a shorthand for that, on the surface, versus being warmer, which is an El Nino. And right now, we expect this La Nina or cooler water conditions to continue into at least the first half of this winter and into January of next year. And what this means is that the jet stream will go a little bit further north than it usually does. And what that means is that we're probably going to see less precipitation, less moisture coming off the ocean towards us. And so we think that there's a good chance that this multi-year drought we're in will extend now into 2023. And of course, every year gets worse than the one before it. And so next year we could have more significant impacts than what those that we're currently facing. So to the supervisor's point about saving water now while it's easy is going to be easier than trying to save water when it's harder. And then finally, I would also mention that it's going to take years of rain to really recover across the county in terms of what we normally expect to see in terms of our water and vegetation. In the last 3 years, we've actually missed an entire winter's worth of rain. So if you can picture that, we're just that much short on what has fallen into our watersheds, what's in the ground, what our vegetation, our trees are taking up. And so it's important to note that even if we do get some rain this winter, we're not going to recover yet for a number of years. And then also just to mention, current efforts though are ongoing. This is very important in addition to the focus that we're going to hear about in terms of managing water in this county. There are a couple of the things that we're doing. First is the county's drought task force. We stood this up last year to deal with the initial stages and consequences of drought. What we've done now this year was we're radically expanding the size and scope of work of this drought task force. We're doubling the number of members. We're inviting more participation from all sorts of folks that are going to be having a hand in dealing with the effects of drought. And that drought task force is going to start work late this month. And in addition to just sharing information, we're going to probably move into a much more operational role for this drought task force. We think that there's going to be a need to really bring more solutions to folks that are suffering from drought, especially as we start to see water systems and wells impacted. And so the goal is to have this drought task force in a position where we can immediately move from just understanding what's going on into taking action. Secondly, I'd also mention drought poses a number of challenges that we don't always see right away to our communities. This could include things like electrical power production or reliability of our electrical grid. And so to that end, we've developed inside our Department of Emergency Management a hazard assessment. We do this for other hazards like a public safety power shutoff or wildfire. And so our goal is to identify what are the secondary or even third level impacts that the community could have to deal with when it comes to having a significant drought. And that allows us to make sure that our plans are better prepared and more aligned to what those challenges might be. I'd also mention Senate Bill 552. For those that are coming new to the game, the state of California has also been extremely active in trying to manage and respond to the current drought. And this includes this bill, which was passed by the governor just last September. And what it does is it places some responsibilities onto local jurisdictions, and including this need to develop water shortage plans for small water systems. And small water systems are those that serve really less than 3,000 customers. And these plans, these contingency plans, really have to identify how are we going to deal with the fact that this water system might be compromised, whether it's the amount of water or the quality of water. What is exactly going to happen when the system gets impacted? Another feature of the bill is to expand the drought task forces into a mandatory requirement. Now, the county got ahead of this last year by creating its drought task force, and we're simply expanding the current one, and that satisfies the need under the Senate bill, but it highlights the fact that the state of California wants to engage with just 58 drought task forces and not with a whole bunch of local governments and water agencies. And then finally, we're required now to develop a county plan, including the drought and water risk to our communities, as well as solutions for drinking water. This is pretty fundamental. We know droughts can impact agriculture, hygiene, production, energy, but nothing more fundamental than drinking water. And so the goal is here to make sure that we have plans in place to address shortages so that people don't run short of drinking water. And then lastly, I'd share the fact that the Board of Supervisors took action last month to empower both our department and Sonoma Water to take a look way ahead, not just the current drought, but what would happen if the drought were to continue for multiple years. And this is a result of climate change. And climate change really brings there's two sides of that coin for us. One is drought, which is what we're currently experiencing here. Climate change may also bring the potential for extreme flooding. County is no stranger to flooding, especially along the Russian River and in Sebastopol and the Laguna. But it's important to note that catastrophic flooding is something we've not had to deal with. And so the board has authorized us to take a real hard look at some of the challenges that a catastrophic flood or a catastrophic drought could present to the community. And we're starting work on that this month. So that really concludes my formal comments, but certainly we'll be here to answer, I'm sure, many questions that people might have.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate that. A couple points to add to that is not only the board and you working together looking at the boom and bust cycle of drought and flood, but also we put $5 million towards enhanced water projects. Some of those deal with the groundwater sustainability plans in our basins or our aquifers and how we get recharge appropriately and regulation set up right. And on the other side, some of it is direct projects in Alexander Valley, Green Valley, and others. So a lot of work being taken place. But one thing I want to remind everybody, as much as Director Godley talked about the La Nina and El Nino conditions, is that what we are experiencing more and more are boom and bust storm systems. They refer to them as Pineapple Express storms. For those of you who, like me, maybe grew up here in Sonoma County, in the same year where we might get the same amount of water in, for instance, 2019 or 2018, we used to get that same amount of water, but percolated out and into the ground over multiple months over the wintertime. With boom and bust storms, we might be able to fill our reservoirs up, but that doesn't mean that individual areas have a high infiltration rate. It doesn't mean that the water in different basins are really going down into the ground and wells are being taken care of. California in the last drought in 2012 through 2014, for the first time began regulating groundwater use. And the way they did that was that is not in the authority of a county or a city particularly. It is for what are now called groundwater sustainability agencies. And these groundwater sustainability agencies, and Dubé, who I know is on this call as well and responding to people, have their own governing boards of the cities, county representatives, and others on them. And Santa Rosa Plain has one, Petaluma has one as well, and Sonoma Valley does. So there's a lot of projects going in right now. We've actually work on using winter water and pumping it into old wells so that it percolates down into the profile. We have the groundwater sustainability agencies. We have the conservation work. Obviously, any building and development, people ask a lot of questions about that. Goes through with the allocations that different retail areas, different cities and jurisdictions have. And then obviously the conversion of wastewater into value are at a very high rate in Sonoma County, and we're looking to increase that more. Without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Philip with the State Water Board. Philip Dutton is a senior engineer with the State Water Resources Control Board. Look at a current and potential future curtailments that limit how much water can be pulled out of the Russian River. Philip.
All right, thank you for having me, Supervisor Gore. I appreciate your time this afternoon. Thank you, everyone. Welcome. As has been mentioned, my name is Philip Dutton. I'm a senior engineer here at the Division of Water Rights at the State Water Resources Control Board. Before I get too far into my slide deck, I've got just a brief set of slides today. I wanted to give a kind of an overview on the role of the Division of Water Rights and how we're playing a role in this year's emergency. The Division of Water Rights is the entity that will administer the state's water rights priority system for surface water diversions. Curtailments last year, and then again this year, are the necessary step to implement the water rights priority system in cases where there's not adequate supply to meet demands. And historically, water rights will follow what we call a first in line, first in right philosophy. And the curtailments this year are really the implementation of that philosophy. So here we go. To begin, I wanted to kind of outline the different bins of water rights that we have. We have appropriative water rights. These are rights that have a discrete priority date. So when we talk first in line, we've got a discrete date, and we curtail based on the priority of that right. An appropriative water right, once it's curtailed, that right holder must fully cease water diversions. Contrast that to a riparian water right. They do not have unique priorities. When a reduction is required, riparian rights correlatively share the water that's commonly available to them. Through the emergency regulation this year, we're using a water budget developed through using their 2017 to 2019 demand data, so what they're reporting as their usage, as the baseline for that reduction. Right holders are authorized to divert up to that assigned water budget for the month and subject to whatever percent reduction they're correlatively experiencing. Our emergency regulation provides for limited exceptions to curtailment. Certifications and other approved petitions under the previous emergency regulation for 2021 are still valid. So if anyone has a previous exemption, that is allowed to continue to be used. Although they could certainly request a modification of that coming forward this year. So a quick overview of the timeline we've gone through. The State Water Board's new emergency regulation was approved and took effect around June 1st. And on the 14th of June, the Division of Water Rights issued these orders to all water right holders in the Russian River watershed. The orders that were issued were called Orders Regarding Curtailment Status. And with those orders, right holders were directed to monitor an online curtailment status list, which we'll call a CSL, posted on our website. June 16th, we posted that first curtailment status list, or CSL, although I'd known at that point, no rights were initially curtailed. Here we look at the next couple of updates to that status list. June 30th, which shows the first update with curtailments. And then for the update to the list that was effective at the beginning of August, you can start to see the trickling up of curtailments as supplies decrease in the watershed and demands continue to remain high throughout our demand data set. As Supervisor Gore has already described, FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, has approved their flow variance to the Potter Valley project. PG&E is now releasing 5 CFS to the East Branch of the Russian River. It had previously been upwards of 75 or 80 CFS. With that dramatic reduction in supplies to the Russian River watershed, division staff expect that we're going to have to post a revised curtailment status list with further curtailments likely to be this week. I suspect we'll have that published tomorrow morning. Our curtailment status list is posted online. This is just a quick screenshot of what it looks like for anyone that is interested. You can find it at the link here. You can search by application ID if you have a water right yourself, or if you want to search by owner name. You can also filter by the curtailment status list to see just who exactly is curtailed. Of a particular note for our Sonoma County audience today, I wanted to address what we call a 10,000 acre foot reservation. There's this stored water reserved in Lake Mendocino that's available for certain appropriators within Sonoma County. Eligible users of this reservation may submit a claim form online to us to identify that they continue to redivert stored water. A curtailment of note does not prohibit this rediversion. At this point, the claim form has been closed. Right holders had 14 days upon the initial order to submit the form to us. But if they are initially curtailed now, a right holder can email us at the email address on the screen and request access to that claim form so that they can continue to redivert the stored water available to them. And in closing, I've got a couple of links here, some information. Please feel free to screenshot it, or I can make sure we provide it to you in any other way necessary. I can put it into the chat or the Q&A if there's questions. Our Russian River Drought webpage has the curtailment status list, in addition to much other useful information. I encourage everyone to please subscribe to our Drought email list for regular updates. And then again, this is the direct link to the status list on our website. I'll be available for questions as they come up, and thank you for your time this afternoon.
Thank you, Philip. Appreciate that. I just want to, for anybody listening in who doesn't speak in water talk, we've been referring to a number that is referred to as acre feet. And so when Philip talks about 10,000 acre feet, an acre foot is, if you can imagine, a full acre of land, 1 foot deep, filled with water. And it's the equivalent of 326,000 gallons. So in water talk and big water talk, instead of talking about gallons as we do in our homes, when we talk about large water flows, because those numbers can get crazy very quickly, we refer to them as acre feet.
Thank you for that translation.
If you ever need appreciate you. I forget that as well sometimes. Thank you very much, Philip. I want to pass it over to Veronica Civi, Deputy Director of Water and Environmental Management in the town of Windsor. The town of Windsor has launched an innovative program, gives residents and businesses, for our understanding, a new way to help keep their landscaping alive during a drought using recycled water. Veronica, I want to pass it over to you.
Great. Thank you, Supervisor Gore. Let me share my screen here. Okay. So I am Veronica Civi, Deputy Director of Water and Environmental Management for the town of Windsor. And I am here today to talk to you about a new recycled water fill station program that we've just initiated in Windsor. So I'm proud to say that Windsor has always been a leader among communities nationwide in the use of recycled water for irrigation. It was one of the first in the nation to plumb an entire residential neighborhood with recycled water for landscape irrigation, and also provide recycled water for toilet flushing, which is still done at Windsor High School and one of the fire stations in town. Windsor treats its water to an advanced standard, which allows for unrestricted reuse in virtually all reclaimed water applications. So first, let's talk a little bit about recycled water. What is it and where does it come from? Recycled water is wastewater generated from homes and businesses. When Windsor residents take a shower, wash dishes, use the bathroom, or do laundry, their wastewater is sent through the sewer system to the wastewater treatment plant, where it is carefully processed to be safe for a variety of beneficial reuse. Is recycled water safe? Yes. Recycled water is regulated by the California Water Resources Control Board. Windsor staff are responsible for demonstrating that it meets the strict standards that are set by the board and is safe for reuse. Why should we use recycled water? Well, every drop of recycled water that is used is a drop of potable water that is conserved. Even before the drought, recycled water was an important way to conserve our valuable drinking water resource. And now that we are in a drought, recycled water has become even more important. So how much recycled water does Windsor produce? Well, in 2021, Windsor processed about 560 million gallons of wastewater. 527 million gallons was used in one way or another for beneficial reuse. And 280 million gallons of that was directed towards recycled water application. Again, that's 280 million gallons of potable water that was saved by using recycled water. Like most of our partner agencies, Windsor is currently in a level 2 water shortage condition, which requires us to meet a 20% reduction in Russian River diversions compared to 2020. Windsor residents are doing a great job conserving, and in June of this year, we used almost 21% less water than in June of 2020. The town has several rebate programs in place to help with water conservation: a turf rebate program, efficient irrigation rebate program, an irrigation controller rebate program, and a laundry to landscape rebate program. We also distribute free water conservation kits at giveaways and have an active public outreach program. But given the extended drought conditions, the town was looking for ways to do more and ways to help residents find ways to do more. So in July of this year, we kicked off for the first time ever a residential recycled water fill station. The town of Windsor has expanded its recycled water program to offer free recycled water through a small volume fill station available to citizens, commercial businesses, and industries for irrigation of ornamental landscape and residential gardens. Recycled water is available to self-haulers at the town-staffed fill station in Kaiser Park. So I want to point out that this fill station is not just limited to Windsor residents, but anyone that is interested in conserving water and wants to do their part. The process is pretty easy. First, you need to complete a recycled water fill station application. Applications can be found at the website listed at the bottom of this page, or hard copies can be obtained by visiting the Town of Windsor Public Works Department. Included in the application is information about where the recycled water is going to be used and how the user plans on transporting the water. After submitting the application, users must attend a site supervisor training. Again, the training is available on the town's website listed on this page, or available in hard copy form at the Public Works Department. After completing the training, residents fill out a self-certification statement saying that they've completed the training and agree to following the recycled water use guidelines. After that, you're good to go. So the recycled water fill station is located at Kaiser Park on 700 Windsor River Road in Windsor. There is a map of the fill station location also on the town's website. Currently, operating hours are Tuesday through Thursday, 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. But the hours are subject to change based on staffing availability and public demand. So check the town's website for more current information. Users can take up to 300 gallons per trip to the fill station. We do have a large volume program available to users, and they can find out more information on the town's website for that. The program ends at the end of the season, either when demand drops off or when the wet season starts. The town accepts a variety of sizes and types for hauling containers. The main requirement is that the container must be sealable, and your vehicle should be suitable for hauling the size of container you're using. For example, the tote on the upper corner of the slide is about 300 gallons. You wouldn't be able to haul a tote that size strapped to the top of your sedan. The containers shown on the bottom of the page are a little bit smaller, around 5 to 10 gallon sizes, and are commonly used for manually moving water. All of these are an example of acceptable containers to use at the fill station. No matter what type of container you use, all containers have to be labeled with recycled water, do not drink. They can be hand labeled in Sharpie, or we also have stickers available for use at the fill station. So just a few items that recycled water is not suitable for. As I mentioned, it's not suitable for drinking, shouldn't be used for cooking or in the kitchen, bathing or showering, or filling your pools or spas, or for children's water toys. It shouldn't be connected to the household domestic plumbing system or below ground irrigation systems. And discharging to the street gutter or storm drain is also not allowed. Some watering guidelines: when using recycled water, hand watering methods are great, buckets, watering cans. You can also use above ground hose connections to your drip system. Watering is not allowed during, before, or immediately after rain events, and you shouldn't water soil that is already wet. You want to make sure the recycled water soaks into the soil and doesn't pond or leave your yard. Recycled water shouldn't enter the street gutters or storm drains or creeks. And just something to note that recycled water has a higher nitrogen content than potable water, so fertilizer may not be necessary and should be minimized or avoided. And lastly, just some health and safety guidelines when using recycled water. As I mentioned, again, do not drink recycled water or use it in food preparation. You should always wash your hands after handling recycled water, especially before eating or smoking. Recycled water can be used to water fruits and vegetables, but we recommend that you wash the fruits and vegetables with potable water before eating and cooking. And any hoses or containers that you use to handle recycled water should be dedicated just for that purpose. And again, prevent overspraying of recycled water onto surfaces that don't need it. So Windsor is proud and excited to offer local area residents another way to do their part and help with the drought by offsetting potable water use with recycled water. I mentioned that this program is not limited to Windsor residents, but if you would like to find out more, or if there's an opportunity in your local area to access recycled water that's closer to home, please reach out to your local water district or public works department. Thank you.
Thank you, Veronica. Windsor leading the charge. I want to state that not only are we seeing a opportunity for Windsor residents, but countywide with this program, but also for anybody who's interested in the future of development as Windsor. Actually, a lot of the houses built in Windsor over the past 10 to 15 years have purple pipes connected to them. What that means is recycled water actually goes into the houses for use, not in showers, not in baths, not in sink to drink, but into toilets and other usage that allows it another offset. Very innovative and good. I say that because I know one question that I saw, and it comes up every time we have a drought discussion, is why do cities and the county still allow people to build homes even though we're in a drought? And I want to state that every home that has an opportunity to be built in Sonoma County, which is a slow growth community, is within a 5-year plan of an urban water management plan for a city and or the county, and also within the general plans, the land use plans for each area. Furthermore, all of the additions for requirements for conservation that go into those new homes are much less. There's some people who would think that you would do a moratorium and not allow anything to be built. I want to tell you that what everyone deals with is the difficulty that no one issue remains in and of itself here in our community. We deal with homelessness on the streets. We deal with a huge issue, a lack of affordable housing supply, market rate housing. We have very small cities that have urban growth boundaries and community separators protected on the other side. So controlling growth and managing the future of Sonoma County is always front and center, but the gains that can be made by permanent conservation far outweigh anything we're talking about in terms of these developments. Secondly, continuing to enhance the ability of wastewater to get back into systems can far outweigh what we're talking about in terms of a few hundred houses being built. So a lot of good work needing to be done. I want to just, as we get into the Q&A, a couple other things that come up every once in a while. One is people say, why don't you build more storage? The future of water storage in California and in Sonoma County is really about below ground storage in our aquifers, in our groundwater basins. We have one program, for example, in Alexander Valley called FloodMar, where we're working with landowners to amend their water rights and amend a lot of the work that we do to get more water when we have these big storms come in out onto the farmlands and into the area, so it percolates into the groundwater aquifers. So when we have these big flood events, the water that goes out to the ocean, it has a chance to what we call slow down, so it can sink down and it can spread down into the profile. That's one thing we're doing not only in Alexander Valley, but in many areas of, as I mentioned before, the only groundwater regulating agencies, which are groundwater sustainability agencies. If you want to look at that, you can always Google Sonoma County GSAs or groundwater sustainability agencies. I also get a lot of questions about desalinization. People think, well, why don't you just put a desalinization plant out somewhere in Bodega and start converting salt water into fresh water? First thing to say is that is not only hugely cost prohibitive because of the terrain. It is a huge issue with respect to the environmental degradation of a kelp forest and what it would take to get something like that permitted. Marin County has investigated desalinization. They're in a better situation than us to do that, but they also do not have their own water supply. They depend, in many cases, especially northern Marin, depends upon our system. They're closer, their topography is better. By and large, think about the fact that currently our water really, it doesn't have a cost to the water. It really is, the cost is how it's transported. And as a wholesale agency, we sell that for about $1,000 an acre foot. Desalinization would be $5,000 or more. And once again, a project like that is not nearly as effective. It's actually less cost to convert wastewater not only into secondary or tertiary treated wastewater, but into full reverse osmosis, which would allow that water in places like in Southern California to be put back into the ground or even turned into potable water through reverse osmosis. A couple other projects funded by the state in Hillsburg, big effort to turn the wastewater, the excess wastewater to go back for all landscaping in Hillsburg. And in Cloverdale, another big grant from the state, $3 million to complement the $8 million into Hillsburg to go into more water systems changes. Cloverdale took on a dramatic effort to identify leaks in their system, in addition to doing lawn replacements, and they were able to achieve a 35% plus conservation target in the last drought. I'd also like to encourage everyone like me to pull out lawns in your yard and non-native plants and put back in native drought tolerant varieties. That's what I've done on my home, and I hope you'll join me in doing that. We have great groups through also the Master Gardener program. If you look up Sonoma County Master Gardener or the Habitat Corridor Project and Google those in, and you can find some great resources. Paul, I'm going to go to over to you to help us work through any questions in the Q&A box that are still left over. And once again, I want to thank everybody for joining us.
Well, thank you, Chair Gore. Really appreciate that. In fact, you've hit on some of the big questions we have today. So really appreciate your jumping on that. A lot of questions about the demands from housing growth and agricultural as well. I just want to remind people to, if they do have a question that they'd like to ask, please, if you're joining us on Zoom, go ahead and click on the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen and plug in your question there. We do have staff available helping to answer some of those questions. We'll try to pose as many as we can. You're also welcome to just put them in the comments area of the Facebook. If you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, please just put your question in the comments area. We have staff tracking those as well. And then also, you're also very much welcome to send an email to us at publicaffairs@sonoma-county.org. That's public affairs, one word, @sonoma-county.org, and we will get back to you. So Let's get started. We have one of our media partners here, Mary Callahan from the Press Democrat, asks, are there water systems you believe could be compromised soon? And I wonder if we want to go to Philip first. Philip, we had an interesting conversation yesterday about all the different water systems we have in the county. Maybe you could help just describe the difference between a water system and a water district.
Yeah, thanks, Paul, for kind of a bit of background information. A public water system is generally thought to be a water system that provides water to the public, but it serves at least 25 people for some 60 days of the year. That definition can be pretty broad and includes both what we think of as a public water system, our municipalities, water districts, and larger entities like that. But it also includes small businesses, farms, small schools, rural mobile home parks, anything like that, where water is being purveyed to the public, or even in some cases to employees. One thing I'll note to kind of address Mary's question is that our regulation does provide an exception where people can continue to divert water to meet certain minimum human health and safety needs. That's generally thought to be 55 gallons per person per day, which in some cases can be a pretty dramatic reduction from what their typical usages are. But there's some further limitations to how that water can be used. And the water right holder is the one that's responsible for submitting that paperwork to us. So if you're a individual that is directly taking water out of the Russian River or one of the tributary creeks, you've already got a relationship with us. If you're a customer to a city, a municipality, one of the water districts, that entity is the one that's going to be working directly with us.
And do you know how many, do you remember the number you had for how many we have in Sonoma County versus districts?
I'm not completely sure off the top of my head. I want to say it was about 125 community water systems in the county. That probably includes the larger, ones that we're familiar with, as well as these more small scale public water systems. But my colleagues in the Division of Drinking Water would be the ones that would have that information more precisely.
Yeah, and Chair Gore, I think as we were talking about yesterday, that's like one of the most in the state, as I recall, or among any county.
Yeah, we were talking about this recently. If you count every water system in Sonoma County, as Philip said, under that definition, you're talking about 400 plus systems. If you dwindle it down to really actively larger systems, not just the cities, but that are actively continually providing water, you're talking about 120 to 140. So there's a couple different ways to look at it, but we're told that is the most of any county in the state, which is not unique to Sonoma County. We're used to having the most fire districts, the most school districts, the most water districts. And a big part of that is because of our unique topography and how these different areas saturate with different cultures within them. One thing I want to ask Philip if they've ever looked at with another question that came in online, because we've done some of our own analysis, but when you work through the curtailment work, any estimate on illegal diversions, on the use of, as was mentioned, legal cannabis grows and other things. It's been a very difficult thing for us to get a handle on, not only for estimates, but at the same time, very difficult thing to go up into the hills and try and chase.
Yeah, from a kind of assessing the impact of curtailments, we look at the term of what we call reach losses, how much water is being lost in various reaches of the river. And last year, the reach losses were still fairly high despite the curtailments that were out there, indicating losses to illegal diversion, certainly, but also the exceptions that we've discussed, losses to the natural environment, losses to evaporation, other cases like that. As far as those illegal diversions, we've got a very robust effort for doing curtailment inspections. But we do have a complaint system as well, the Cal EPA complaint system. If you want to Google that, unfortunately, I don't have the URL that I could drop into the chat conveniently. But if there are suspected illegal diversions that you know of, that's a perfectly valid way to get us, and that system generates a tracking number for you. You can see the status and responses to those complaints, and that's the best way for us to get boots on the ground.
And I would add, Philip, that that's also for any other complaints that are germane to the system about areas where there's active curtailments and if there's pumping going on. We've had a full review from you all about the compliance and issues, but overall, we've seen a high level of compliance on these systems. I want to go also to another thing, which is there's some mention of Scott Dam, and which reference to something been written about in the press, appropriately, the Potter Valley project. So one of the things that many folks don't know is that with our dynamic system here in Sonoma County, is that the actual, the Russian River before we were here went dry in many aspects during the summertime, not only before Lake Sonoma in the 40s installed, but also before the Potter Valley project, which is actually a diversion, a tunnel through the mountains that connects the Eel River and the Russian River. So what happens is water comes up into Scott Dam and Lake Pillsbury, pulls up there, goes down PG&E, puts it through the tunnels. That's a hydroelectric project that started in the early 1900s, and it delivers water to the point where we all developed around that water source, consistently flowing during the summer. PG&E has applied for abandonment and actually been granted that by the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. We in Sonoma County, and likewise in Mendocino County specifically, are very strong in our advocacy to keep the diversions flowing at 60,000 acre feet throughout, even if we can't pull that always during the summer months, but if we can pull it during the high water times in the winter times. So that's a big ongoing discussion, but it also necessitates the continued work for us to conserve, sink into the aquifers, and do all this work that we're doing. But once again, these are embedded into our plans. But the reason we're speaking with all of you here today is because, just like fire preparedness, the only way that this can happen is by everybody taking action. Just simply, if everybody in Sonoma County, 500,000 strong, reduce 10 gallons per person per day, which is not that hard, make a huge impact on our entire system for these dry years. Going over to Paul, is there anything else we want to?
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on that previous question. Are we aware of any of the water systems in our area that could be at risk of being compromised soon? I don't know if Director Godley or any of you have an answer for that.
Well, I'll just jump in real quickly. We're seeing challenges in many parts of the county at this point. West County, Sonoma Valley, South County, especially North County, relative to quantities of water that wells are producing or the quality of water that wells are being produced. We are asking everyone to report dry wells via the state's reporting system, which is mydrywell.water.ca.gov. Basically, that's how we're going to get a picture of what's going on here. If people don't talk about their wells, then we're going to miss the big picture, as it were. At this point, it's not nearly as severe an impact here in the county as it is in the Central Valley, where they're really struggling and have had struggles for many years. But as the drought continues and as the summer continues, we could start to see more and more problems popping up all over the county.
And to maybe complete my thought on the health and safety exceptions earlier, as I say, that's the minimum water use. So if a small community or small surface water diverter is using that as their primary source of supply, they filed for that exception. That implies that that is the only water that's available. They don't have a backup supply. They don't have a groundwater alternative. They don't have an interconnection to a larger supplier. That is the only amount of water that's available to them. And to me, those would be the ones, if they're limited to that 55 gallons per person per day, those are the ones that we need to take the closest look at and keep an eye and give whatever assistance we can.
Great, thank you. Chair Gore, you mentioned about the encouraging people to take out their lawns. Many of us are moving ahead if we haven't done that already. One of our viewers, Jan, asks, he says he lives in Sebastopol, between Sebastopol and Occidental on well water. Says the house behind me is installing a swimming pool. Wants to know, how is that permitted? Are we looking at any restrictions on swimming pools? Do we know?
So back to the water regulation is managed by the groundwater sustainability agencies for those basins that come in. Also, with any restrictions on building pools or tanks or otherwise, that would come out of the city or the county. If he's talking about the county specifically, we do not have restrictions on swimming pools. That might be something we look at in the future. But the biggest issue, as Ann Dubé responded, is not the pool itself. It's about, are they putting a cover on for managing evaporation? In the past, in our last drought, or the beginning of this one, if you want to call it that, 10 years ago, had a lot of people who were also asking why there were agriculture reservoirs being put in. That's actually a very beneficial thing to store water, to pull it out at the right time in the aquifer, store it for use at a later time. There's been somebody, I think, on the question and answer who also talked about vineyards and dry farming. I want folks to understand that the way the vineyards are set up in California, throughout the United States, is that they are managed and put in with irrigation in mind. You can't switch an existing vineyard easily over to dry farming. The way that the roots develop, the way that they get their water is completely different. Agriculture and environment and people are always the big three that we talk about when we talk about splitting the water in California and in Sonoma County. Obviously, we depend heavily upon the agriculture industry for jobs and for economy as well. So all of those things, those three things, usually come ahead of recreation management, which is something that we keep in mind, managing parks and managing enough flows for people to get onto the river. And then also for ornamental use. In the last time we had regulations come out of the state, it wasn't the Water Resources Control Board, it was Fish and Wildlife, and it was in Mark West Creek, it was in Green Valley Creek, it was in Dutch Bill, it was in a couple others, and it was more related to keeping water in those streams for juvenile salmon and threatened and endangered salmon to come through. I state all this because this is a part of the world we live in where you can't focus on one thing. We obviously, the water and where it's connected are all across the board. But when we went through that, those 5 watersheds that were regulated were not allowed to do outdoor ornamental irrigation. You could still do business irrigation, which is vineyards, which is other stuff like that, and because it had a purpose for commerce. So some people might not agree upon the triage, but that's how it currently stands, and that's what we're moving forward with.
Okay, thank you very much. Just a couple of quick questions. This one's another one for Philip. The question is, will the State Water Resources Control Board be implementing any additional curtailments along the Russian River this year? I think you said yes, that those could come as soon as this week. Is that right?
Yes, I expect that tomorrow we will probably be announcing additional curtailments in response to the Potter Valley project variance that FERC approved. With that said, likely that there will be additional updates to that curtailment status list throughout the season until the rains are come and hopefully lift to the status for everyone. This time last year, we weren't until the first big rainstorms in mid-October before curtailments were really lifted. We'll continue to update probably at least on a monthly basis throughout the rest of the dry season. And then again, as the situations change on either the supply side or the demand side, we'll update those statuses list accordingly.
Great, thank you very much. And I have a question for Veronica. The question is, are there any other cities or water districts that are offering similar programs as you're doing there in Windsor, offering free treated wastewater? Are you aware of any?
Yeah, I am aware that Healdsburg is offering a similar program. They actually operated it last year for their residents. And I've heard that a few other agencies are looking into it, but I would suggest reaching out to your local public works department or water agency to find out specific programs in your area.
Okay, that's great. Well, that's a great segue to wrapping up our session today. We're at the top of the hour. I want to thank everybody for being with us today. We did have a question asking whether copies of this webinar will be available later. Absolutely. We will have copies of the slides that were presented today, as well as a video recording of this town hall. Will be posted on our website, socoemergency.org, which is an excellent resource, by the way, for finding out things about where your districts are, getting links to cities, water districts, and finding out about programs like Veronica was telling us about what's happening in Windsor. There's lots of other information. So concerning the drought, we encourage you to go there and to Sonoma Water website as well. So with that, we just want to remind you that these are monthly town hall meetings. Our next one will be on September 1st. We'll be offering another update on our drought situation. And until then, if you have any questions, please go ahead and send them to us at publicaffairs@sonoma-county.org, and we will seek to get you an answer. Chair Gore, I'll go back to you for any final thoughts.
Thank you. It's hard to sit here and not acknowledge that over the past 5 years, but if we even go deeper to 10 years, we have experienced more than 9 federally designated disasters in Sonoma County. Fires, floods, droughts, pandemic. Sometimes we jokingly say, bring on the locusts. But I just want to tell everybody that we have it within us to respond to all of this. We've done it with fires. We've shown that we can be on our toes instead of our heels. We have a lot of work to do to own the future on fire and water. Everybody has to keep in mind that we're also in an earthquake area. But life is risk, and living with risk does not have to be something filled with fear or constant trauma. It can be an understanding that the world is telling us something and we need to wake up and change how we act each and every day. So take incremental action in your own life. If you're looking for ideas on how to do that, there's an amazing organization called Daily Acts here in Sonoma County that I champion each and every time I can. And we can do this because we've shown we can do it with other events. And blessings to everybody. And thanks to the experts who joined us tonight, and onward and upward.
Thank you all.